So after holding space for hundreds and hundreds of women across the globe and more than 300 hours of holding that conversation, you had the three questions that you could use, and it could help you identify or predict potential physical abusive behavioral traits before you move into a relationship. Tell me, what were you taught on how to deal with frustration? Even more directly, tell me about how you deal with frustration. Most abusive men cited that the reason why they physically abused a woman was because A, she was getting on his nerve, or she was being nasty to him, or she was making them become so frustrated, or because she made him lose his cool. Do you beat a man because you are frustrated with a man? Do you get into a fight with a man because you are actually frustrated with him? So being frustrated can never be a good enough reason. When you ask the question, tell me how you deal with frustration, you are unpacking what has been his foundational knowledge on how to deal with this most often cited reason why men physically abuse women. But secondly, more importantly, when you ask the question, tell me about how you deal with frustration, what you're actually doing is you are trying to pick from this guy, does he have the capacity to deal with complex emotions? A guy would act out in a way that is familiar to what he was shown on how to deal with complex emotion. I'm going to say that again. A guy would always act out the way he was shown on how to deal with complex emotion. Whatever he was taught on how to deal with complex emotion, that's what he would show to you when that emotion is elicited. If violence was how he was shown, if he saw his parent replying with violence or responding with violence when they were frustrated, that's the same thing he's going to do. Emotions or emotional intelligence are like vocabulary. My vocabulary bandwidth is dependent on how much vocabulary I've been exposed to. There are words I don't know because I've not been exposed to it. The same thing with emotional vocabulary. The more vocabulary, the more range of exposure a guy has been exposed to on how to deal with different emotions, the more he becomes robust in how he deals with situations that elicit different complex emotions. A guy who cannot handle complex emotions like guilt, shame, vulnerability, embarrassment, frustration would definitely act out in violence when these emotions are triggered. He will most often than not act in a violent way in instances where these emotions are elicited. I love how Ibibio put this. Ibibio says, Agirekpan. Agirekpan is a very accurate way of, if I had a way to translate that into my day-to-day practice, I would be so happy. You see, that particular phrase, Agirekpan, is someone who has just tied himself up and doesn't know how to unpack or how to lose himself. Isn't that the same way most abusive men behave when you are trying to challenge them or you're asking them questions that they cannot answer because they just don't have the vocabulary? They are struggling, but they don't know how to get themselves loose. And what do? They self-implode and they extend that implosion to someone around them. Before you move into that home, ask him, how do you deal with complex emotions? The next question you need to ask this guy is, tell me, what does home mean for you? What does home mean for you? For Mimi's case, you could notice that immediately this guy got her into a place called home. He acted in a way that is consistent with what he has always seen to be happening at home. When you ask a guy, tell me, what does home mean for you? You're not only saving yourself from being homeless, you are saving yourself from having to deal with a long-standing association, unhelpful association that he had learned over time. People will most likely act out the most dominant behavioral pattern that is consistent with their dominant observation when you reintroduce them into an environment that is similar in function or in structure to way that learning occurred in the first place. So for Mimi abuser, having Mimi back into home was an opportunity by sheer association to behave and act out the pattern he had observed over and over again. Ask a guy, what does home mean for you? What did you see growing up? What was the dominant environment that you noticed while growing up? What was the consistent emotional atmosphere at home for you growing up? When you ask that question and you get a response, make a logical decision, not an emotional one. And the last one, what did you learn on how to deal with a woman? Most of us were never taught on how to deal with a woman. We know how to deal with men because, of course, we are men, but nobody sat us down to teach us this is how you deal with a woman. And for most of us, we don't see women more than objects that is meant for sex. We can't even fathom that we could have relationship other than sex relationship with a woman because we have not been taught. No one showed us. Nobody sat us down to help us to see that there are other levels of relationship that you could have with a woman other than just for sex, which comes down to objectification. The same idea that makes it possible not to see any other form of relationship with a woman is the same idea that normalizes the objectification that they must be beaten to be corrected. It's the same idea because it's the objectification of women that is responsible for that. After hundreds of hours working with women across the globe, I genuinely do believe that you can spot predictive behavior of physical abuse in a relationship. If you want to learn more about this, drop me a follow and join my upcoming program called Bed Chasm. See you there.